Hi Chris, how are you?
Good morning, Rod. I think I'm okay. I've got a sore throat, as will come out on the recording. Hopefully I won't cough too much. But I've got the lurgy, which I'm hoping clears before Christmas. Because nobody wants lurgy over Christmas, do they?
Nobody wants lurgy over Christmas. There's enough stressful things to be getting on with without you feeling like absolute garbage.
Yeah, I've got to go shopping later, which will probably just finish me off. So there you go.
Yeah, I'm hoping to go look at some cars later, but I'm not sure we'll actually figure that out. Let's not go into that today. Yeah.
Car shopping's way more exciting than going into town trying to figure out what to buy people you haven't bought for yet.
I don't know that it is, because car shopping, the concept is quite good, but then you have to put an awful lot of money down at some point, and that's not exciting. I don't like that bit.
Yeah, okay, I can understand that. And also car shopping, I guess, can be stressful if you and your partner are in different places of what you want to buy.
Yeah. I mean, separation is definitely better when it comes to that kind of thing. Should we tell the good people what episode we're on?
Yeah, sure, let's do it. So it's episode 151. It's the 15th of December, and we're heading towards Christmas.
We're getting closer, and I was right. If this is episode 151, and there's 52 weeks in a year, then this is going to be our third year of podcasting.
Yeah, I think you're 100% right, and time has passed me by once again.
Those maths add up. Tell us about your weather.
Weather is pretty good, actually. That's it. It's a crisp winter's morning. It's not too cold. It's not too hot. It's not too damp. It's perfect.
Sounds good to me. It's okay here. It's a little on the damp side, it must be said. Yesterday morning was lovely, down on the beach with the dog. Beautiful sort of winter's morning. Not that cold, 7-8 degrees.
Ooh, that's all right, actually. That sounds pretty good.
Yeah, it was pretty good. Should we do some follow-up?
Yeah, let's dive into it. So, listeners, you may remember last week, I think I left a saying I was about to go and migrate my father-in-law's laptop from a very old version of macOS 10 to the most current, I think M2 Air is where we landed in the end, and to the latest version of macOS. You and I discussed, do we do it manually? Do we use Migration Assistant? And where I've ended up is Migration Assistant is your friend. It was really good. It just did it, basically. So I fired up both PCs. I turned off Wi-Fi on both of them. I plugged them in via Ethernet, which I think was the pro move, by the way, because then you've got a real consistent transfer level. But plugged them both in, went and found Migration Assistant on both Macs, on the Mac I was getting rid of. Launched that up, said we want to transfer to another Mac. It just sat there, basically, it's ready. Go to the new Mac, as you're logging in, go, I want to transfer all my data. They find each other over the network. You click on the names, you click continue. Very easily, very well done. Reckon it was going to take about 5 hours. Ended up taking 2.5 maybe. Did about 400,000 files, which seems like a lot. He does have a huge amount of photos. Went on the new Mac, and you know what? Everything just kind of worked. No need for Rosetta. I did go through the apps folder and just remove some old apps, like there was a TomTom navigation firmware updater app, which he doesn't use anymore. So just add a little cleanse. But actually, on the whole, it all just worked really well. It was super smooth. Did need to open up Mail and re-authenticate because he uses Gmail. That just needed a re-authentication on your new device. But everything worked, and it installed the newer versions of Pages and Numbers, because obviously they were on the old device, but were way older. The new version of Photos just upgraded the database. Mail just upgraded the database. I would 100% recommend it, and it just seemed fine. And like I said, I just booted up every app, just make sure they're all upgraded, had the right credentials in, but it doesn't have many apps outside of the Apple ones on there. He seems super chuffed because it now has an amazing battery and it's so much faster. If you upgrade a 10-year-old device, just the incremental year-over-year benefits Apple have delivered, you get it in spades. So there you go. Super easy. If anybody's got to do it over the holidays, this is how you should do it. I would recommend. What it's like going to Windows, no idea. But Mac to Mac, this was perfect.
Well, no one should ever go to Windows anyway, let's face it.
Well, there is that, I guess.
Particularly in these days of Copilot. No, that's good. It sounds like a very positive story. I'm glad it all went very well. A question about Apple Mail and Gmail. Apple Mail's spam filtering is frankly awful. So how does he cope with that? Or does he just not sign up for lots of services, or does he just deal with it?
It's never really... I'm kind of putting a face for viewers. It never really comes up, I guess, is what I'm saying. He's never once really gone, Chris, I'm getting loads of spam. So we just left it as it is, and it kind of seems to work. And he's just got a regular Gmail account, not for business or anything. It's one they've had for probably about 20 years at this point. Yeah, so it's never really come up. So I think it's fine.
That's encouraging. I mean, I have seen how Gmail can go with these things, and like I say, if you don't know any better, like you haven't installed MimeStream or one of these third-party Gmail clients, or use Gmail on the web, which is what I encouraged my father to do because the spam was off the charts, and Apple Mail couldn't cope with it as a client. So I just got him to do it in the website, and he's perfectly happy then. But I do know how bad it can be.
Yeah, Apple Mail's spam filtering is never very good, but he uses Mail on all his devices. I don't think he really uses the web client, and it seems fine.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, that's good follow-up. Follow-up from me this week is macOS 15.2, iOS 18.2, and all that malarkey landed in the last, well, I think it came out on Wednesday. And Apple Intelligence is now available for UK users and some other countries as well. I don't have a lot to say about this. My Mac now has it. I've unenrolled all my devices from the beta. I continue to be underwhelmed, I think it's fair to say, by Apple Intelligence.
I like the new Siri animation. I think that's kind of cool. I installed this on my wife's. My wife has an iPhone 16, which I do not. I did install this on her device because I wanted to try out visual intelligence. I also showed her she would get the new Siri, I don't know what you call it, the Siri animation, the Siri ring. Interestingly, I left her installing it, and obviously when it booted up, the launch screen says, do you want to install Apple Intelligence? She must have gone no and just left it as it is. So I then had to go into settings and you move the toggle on. And then I was feeling a bit lackluster, and I couldn't work out how to use visual intelligence. I thought I'd just try it off my own. How do you use it without me Googling how to use it? It's not obvious. So what you need to do is, in the camera app, so you open the camera app once with a click on the camera control button, and then you point it at, say, this tape measure I've got on my desk, and you push and hold the camera button, and then you can either say, tell me what this is, or do a Google image search and find other images for me. Interesting to Google image search. I'm not sure if I can change that because I don't want to use Google image search, but that seems a default. And you can have it describe what it is. And that kind of seemed it. But the camera control, where they're using that button thing, I don't know what we call that, it seems that you can do too much with it because it's very complicated. But you just have to push and hold and wait. I don't know. The interface didn't seem great. And then the actual responses from it didn't seem great. So it's all a bit, I don't know. I was a bit disappointed. I think they are playing catch up, and they're not sprinkling the Apple Magic stuff across the top, which they would have once done, I think.
Yeah, it's all a bit lackluster, isn't it? And as I scroll through the 9 to 5 Mark article that you've linked to, it lists what phones get it, which is everything back to the iPhone XR. The new Apple Intelligence features are Image Playground, which is creating avatars of yourself, basically, which isn't great. As a laugh, I've put it on some of my presentations at work, and people react badly to them. There's Genmoji, which, again, I mean, it's not the worst feature in it, but, it's a pretty low bar inside of all these Apple Intelligence things. ChatGPT support, I think you need to have an account for ChatGPT support, and it's quite limited in that it doesn't use the internet, the ChatGPT thing. I think it's a limited interface Apple have got within that. Camera control updates, as you've kind of mentioned there. Mail app upgrades. And this, Mike Hurley on Upgrade Podcast has talked about this a lot recently. The mail app upgrades on the phone, he loves them. I'm not bothered. I don't think it's as good as what I get in Fastmail or what I get in Gmail, frankly, for its ability to segregate mail into the right boxes. But he's quite right. Why have they only done it on the phone? The iPad is exactly the same OS, really. Why haven't they put it there? And for mail on the Mac, not so these features, which Gmail has had for, I'm going to say 13 years or something like that at this point, is just simply amazing.
Yeah, the mail categories, interestingly, I don't think my wife realised they were there, so she was like, where's all my email? And I just scrolled across to the right, and you can pick all mail. I haven't turned it off, but for somebody that uses their phone and their iPad 100% of the time to do all their email, it is frustrating that the two aren't in sync. Now, I'm sure it will come to the iPad, but it just seems odd it's not there today because you'd have thought it's the same source code, but it's very bizarre how they're rolling some of this out.
Yeah, and all this is on the Mac as well. Actually, just before the show started, even though I upgraded to 15.2 a couple of days ago, I only just now got the Apple Intelligence upgrade stuff, and I have an annoying-looking little Siri icon in the top right-hand corner of my taskbar near the clock that I'm going to have to get rid of, because, frankly, I don't want it there. Should we move on to another story?
I kind of like the colourful icon, but I haven't really found any need to use it, I guess. I do like that they're pushing that you can type to Siri a lot more than what you once could. I think that is one benefit that's come out of that Apple Intelligence era. They're really pushing the type piece now, whereas before it was primarily speech.
Well, I'm clicking it now and it's not doing anything. It's not dropping down the little type to Siri button underneath. So it's obviously super well tested as well.
Well, that's supposed to be good as we are podcasting. The only thing I would say is I fired up the assistant on my Apple TV, and there's it's got the old interface on it. I think that is a thing Apple aren't doing a great job of, that you've now got this mixed interface for talking something. And all I wanted on the Apple TV was say, play this film. I don't like that it's mixed because I just think it's confusing, whereas normal Apple's very good at that consistency piece. We don't seem to have that at all, and I don't get why they haven't just changed the animation everywhere.
Bizarre. Something that is less bizarre and has been oft foretold is that Epic Games has done quite well in getting itself more front and center on Android, and we know that all the troubles they're having with Apple doing that too. This is a story that Epic's dream is starting to come true. Its store will be pre-installed on millions of Android phones. So Telefonica, which is a large comms provider here in the EU and the UK, will bring Epic Games Store to Samsung devices in the UK, Germany, Spain, Latin America, and others. So that's fantastic. If you get that front and center just installed as default on Samsung phones, that I think fair play Epic.
Yeah, I did read this article because I think I'd forgotten that with Android, I guess that phone network providers can do custom installs of stuff. I hadn't because this is what we used to have in the pre-iPhone days, wasn't it? You know, you'd buy your Vodafone, Nokia or Sony Ericsson device. I'm trying to pick brands that don't make phones anymore, and it would come with a horrible skin normally and apps, and you know, you didn't really get one that was stock. So it's interesting now that we're going to go back down this avenue. But yeah, fair play to Epic. Their plan to take over the world has paid off, because people, my kids especially, want the Epic store. They don't understand why they can't have it.
I think it's reasonable, and let's face it, when your kids are old enough to maybe want to buy a phone or demand that they want a phone, if they're that into Fortnite in the Epic store, maybe they'll want you to get them a Samsung and not an Apple device.
I actually see it as a positive that Apple don't allow Epic on their device, because my kid plays Fortnite enough. I don't think he needs it when he's out and about.
Well, let's see what happens, because I can't think that all the judgments will go Apple's way in the upcoming court cases. So who knows, maybe one day we'll have this on the iPhone as well.
The day will come, 100%. Hopefully my children will grow up a little bit between now and then.
Fortnite's for life, man. You can tell us about the next story, because it's your favourite app.
This is my favourite app. So Teams for iPad now supports external webcams. This has actually been the case since the summer, but it's been odd how Microsoft have done it. They haven't really made a song and dance about it. They haven't really done anything to the interface, and it wasn't clear which version you needed to get it, but it is out. I've been using it for a long time. It is really good. The only thing I'd say is I can't pick which camera to use. So you've obviously got a camera on your iPad. If you've got an external camera plugged in, it just uses that. There's no picking and choosing which screen you want to use, but it's fantastic, and it's completely changed how I use Teams, because now I can have it on my big monitor when I'm using my iPad, and I can have everything on there, whereas before I always had to really have Teams on the little iPad screen, so I was looking at the camera that's got my face on it rather than looking over to the distance, even though I'd be looking at the meeting. So this is fantastic. It's taken too long to come, but they've done a pretty good job with it. All they need to do now with the iPad, I think, is allow me to have clamshell mode, and I would be a really happy camper. But I'm now using my 27-inch studio display all day, every day for all my work, and I barely touch the iPad screen. Really good.
Fair enough. I mean, I won't comment on iPad use or Teams particularly. I try and avoid both of them as much as I possibly can. But yeah, that's good. I'm glad it's serving a need for you.
It has taken Microsoft 2 years to implement this, though.
How much of this is Apple's fault, to be fair to Microsoft, with their ability to do these kinds of things?
Apple gave it 2 years ago, and it's taken Microsoft 2 years to implement. I think that's the one frustration, because Zoom has done it for a long time, Google Meet has done it for a long time. Teams was the laggard.
Microsoft being as slow at Apple at some things, who'd have thunk it?
Yeah, quite. But anyway, they've done it, and I'm super happy. And Microsoft, to be fair, have done lots of incremental updates to their productivity suite this year. So on the whole, they're generally quite a good citizen of the platform. Probably way better than Google is with Google Apps.
Yeah, well, if you look at Vision Pro, they're far better than Apple is.
Yeah, 100%. 100%, because all their apps are native.
Speaking of Apple-type events, we have the 2024 App Store Awards happen this week. We talked about the nominations briefly last week, but I thought it would be worth going through the winners and see how many we've heard of this year. It's interesting in this 95 Mac article that there are no comments on this story. Do people really care about award stories anymore?
I don't think so. I think there's so many. It's not like this is the one thing that's won everything. It's 10 categories of different things. So I guess people aren't that fussed by it all. I don't know. I must confess, I'm just glancing at this now, I don't think I have used any of them. So it's probably not going to be a great review from me.
No, and this is going to be relatively quick, I think. So finalists last month. The company that won is Kino from Lux Optics as iPhone App of the Year, which is a movie recording app. Haven't used it. Can't comment. I'm sure it's very good.
I'm sure it's very good. I don't record any movies on my phone, though.
Adobe Lightroom, which why Adobe is winning anything for sort of apps of the year and anything is completely beyond me, but it's the Mac app of the year. I guess we don't really have good photo organization tools on our Mac anymore, or the ability for professional photographers to do this kind of thing. Photos isn't going to cut it for a professional photographer, so I think that's a real stretch to make it Lightroom.
Agreed, but I guess they're limited because I guess they're picking stuff that's available in the App Store.
Yeah, that is true. There's not that much.
So they've instantly shrunk the net they've cast, I guess.
Yeah, Moises as the iPad app of the year. I don't know what that is.
I did look this up because obviously it's on the iPad, and I thought, oh, what's this? And it's an app for musicians, and so I closed the tab immediately.
Yeah, I can't have any real comment on that. There we go. That's Moises. Adobe Lightroom, the Apple Vision Pro app of the year. What If, an immersive story. I mean, great. I'm sure all 7 people who have a Vision Pro really enjoyed that.
That is the problem, isn't it? Nobody's got a Vision Pro.
Yep. Apple Watch app of the year, Lumi from Raha V. I don't know what that is either.
I do not have an Apple Watch, but Lumi is sunrise, sunset, and golden hour. You know, it's a way of just knowing what's going on around you. Apparently it's designed for the iPad.
Why do you need this?
Tell you when it's probably good if you're a photographer and things, because you know if you want to go and get a sunset photo, it tells you the right time to be there, or sunrise.
Sure, but sunset is the hour before golden hour is the hour before sunset, right?
Yeah, I don't.
I have 400 apps that tell me when the sun rises and sunsets. My light bulbs come on and off when the sun rises and the sun sets automatically. I can look and find that out. Why do we need an app for that?
I don't know what you want me to say.
I don't
know. I guess is what I'm trying to say. But it looks.
Move on and tell me.
Most of it's contained in your weather app, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Move on and tell me about F1 TV, because that's something you surely know about.
It's not available in this country. I think that is the problem with that one. I just use Now TV because it's way cheaper. So I'm sad I can't tell you much about F1 TV.
Okay. iPhone Game of the Year, AFK Journey, which does look quite interesting. It looks sort of up my street in terms of it's an XCOM-like tactical battler with a little bit of role-playing game stuff into it. It looks very pretty indeed. I don't have the time really to get involved with something like this, and I saw it involved in app purchases. I don't know how much that is, but looks interesting. Nice art style.
I was just about to say that I think the art style is very good. The in-app purchases, when they're listed, just says various dollar amounts and product. So there are obviously some random coins, I guess, you've got to buy or something like that, which would put me off. Normally, I want to see an in-app purchase, especially for a game, unlock certain levels or whatever it may be. I don't want to see I've got to buy random coins.
Yep. iPad Game of the Year is Squad Busters, which looks like an online thing from sort of Clash of the Clans type looking art style to it. Doesn't really appeal to me. Also looks like it'll be involving in-app purchases. It does involve in-app purchases, so I don't like the look of that.
Agreed. Like I said, I'm not against in-app purchases. I am just when they're coins, and all the ones listed here are special offer or 10,000 gold. So that's an instant tab close. This isn't my kind of game, to be fair.
They're not doing well with this list so far for me, Apple. I got to say I don't think many of these are mainstream in the sense that they're games that want your kids to keep plucking money out of a wallet, and the main stream thing like Adobe Lightroom is for a very dedicated set of people. I don't think this is, as you said a minute ago, spreading the net very wide.
No, they're very niche audiences, a lot of these. The next Mac app looks more interesting though.
So Mac Game of the Year is, thank goodness you're here, by Panic. So I know we're both quite big fans of Panic. You even more so than me, because you've thrown a lot more money at them over the years. What do you think of this?
I thought I'll have a quick look at this, but the art style, I don't know, it doesn't look my sort of game, if I'm honest. But Panic are, I'm not going to say famed, but maybe a little famed for picking and backing games that have got great stories that are just different, which is, they're kind of doing what Apple Arcade said they were going to do, and back, different games that wouldn't normally get made. So maybe this is worth a look, and it's a 20 quid cost. Here's the cost of it. You're not buying coins. We're not going to nickel and dime you. This is a game. You can buy it. So that's interesting. It's in chart position 2. So obviously some people have picked it up following probably these awards.
Yeah, and it's got 5 out of 5 review. It's described as a comedy slap-former. I don't know what a slap-former is.
I guess it's just a funny game that you do funny things. That would be my view.
I mean, what is interesting about it is it appears to be set in Britain. There's a north-south divide thing going on. It's described as, after arriving early for a big meeting with the mayor of a bizarre northern English town, a travelling salesman takes the time to explore and meet the locals. Interesting.
Yeah, interesting. Like I say, Panic are doing those games that are different, which is probably why I would give it a longer look than I normally would.
Apple Vision Pro Game of the Year, Thrasher Arcade Odyssey. Again, I'm not entirely clear what that is, and I will say slightly frustrating to our YouTube viewers. All of these are opening up in the App Store. None of them open up on a web page that I can display inside of the thing, and that's really quite irritating.
Yeah, I thought that might be a problem.
Yeah, and the last one, Apple Arcade Game of the Year, Balatro Plus, which I 100% endorse because it's fantastic.
Which I still haven't played, and I think I just need to set some time aside. And I'm worried, though, if I do, it'll probably be one of these games that I super get into.
Give it half an hour and you'll be addicted.
Yep. And what is impressive, Balatro is available on Mac, iPad, iPhone, and Apple TV. So not the Vision Pro for some reason, but on everything else.
Well, although on Apple TV Plus you do need an actual proper controller, Bluetooth to your Apple TV to make it work.
Oh, okay.
Which isn't the end of the world. Lots of people do. If you've got a spare Xbox or PlayStation, even 4 controller lying around, you can pair it up. But I was surprised you couldn't use the Apple remote.
That's kind of what I was thinking, because I doubt many people have got a controller paired with their Apple TV.
No, and this is where sort of the limit. Apple TV could be a great gaming platform. I think if they sold it with a controller in the box, 8-Bit Do or somebody like that packaged a controller with them. I mean, we're going to talk about Apple and controllers later on in the show. But if they had that sort of partnership, they could probably do a little bit better in games, but then you're going to hit the 64 gig limit of what's available to download and install in the Apple TV Plus, and then it becomes a problem. Apple TV Plus, Apple TV, such a confusing ecosystem.
Agreed. Apple always seems so close to getting games possible, and then at the last minute, they get it so wrong.
Yeah, I think that's enough for that list. Should we move on to the next story?
Yeah, let's do it. I think the list, though, it's a very narrow list. There might be something that people are interested in, but there's just not much there.
Yep. We've spoken a lot about what would happen if Apple pulled out of the EU because of all the rulings that are going against them. We've never done the same sort of thing for the UK. And I wonder if a story like this, and this is in Mac Rumours, claiming that Apple's investment in the UK exceeds £18 billion, which doesn't surprise me. I think there's a lot of money to be made in the UK. I think there's a lot of talent to be made use of. They've obviously got stores here. They've got the London headquarters at Battersea, is it? And there's a lot of, there's been executives. Johnny Ive was British, for goodness sake. So, there's a lot of cultural swap over and benefits to both economies of involving Britain with this. But part of me thinks when they're announcing today something like this is they have an agenda. They want the UK government to go, hang on, don't copy the EU, don't make our app store do this, because look at the amount of money we've invested in you over the years. So it actually struck me as a slightly negative story rather than a positive one.
Yeah, it does feel it was behind their agenda here. Interesting, they've both posted on Twitter as well, /X. So I'm not sure how I feel about that. But Greg Joswiak is over in the UK, as is Tim Cook. So interesting seeing Tim holding a pint. Is he going to drink a pint?
I don't think he's going to drink a pint. Although it's a different colour to Jack Lowden's there in that picture, isn't it? So I wonder if he's actually having a pint of ale.
It's just Tim. Tim is a very health-conscious person. He comes across that way, doesn't he? Clearly looks after himself. But I just wonder whether... Yeah, it's great. They're here. They're doing a bit of PR. There's a lot that happens, obviously, in London. Slow Horses is in the second screen, as you're showing. And then you've got Greg Joswiak at Battersea. Battersea, though, what a place. I'd love to have a look around that office. What a place for them to have their headquarters in the UK.
I have a story about this. Is slightly off topic. I have a story about an American and getting a pint in London. So one of my colleagues at work is an American. He comes from Georgia. He has lived in the UK for, I think, more than 30 years at this point. He's been here a very long time. That might not be right. It might be about 20 plus years. Anyway, he lives in Liverpool. He's effectively given his British citizenship these days. We went to London a couple of weeks ago. He ordered a pint in a traditional London bar, and the barman warned him. He said, "You won't like this, mate." And he said, "What?" Okay, he'd ordered some cask ale. He said, "You won't like this, mate. It's not fizzy lager." Jeff was so offended. And on one level, I'm like, he's right to be offended. As a barman, you just you serve the drink you're asked to give. But obviously, as a London barman, he gets lots of Americans going, "Can I try some of your traditional British beer?"
And they don't like
them
it.
not liking.
Yeah. And they end up pouring it away, which is a waste.
But I can understand why Jeff was so offended. But anyway, that's why I was looking at Tim's drink, thinking, I wonder if he's got a real ale here and he's going to spit it out if he's drinking it anyway.
Yeah, there is that.
There is that. So, moving on. Next story. And this is Sora. We talked about Sora when it first came along, which is OpenAI's movie generation technology. We posted a couple of links to some really weird stuff that it was doing. And now it's available, or kind of available anyway. You can... they had registrations open for a while for people to get in there and do stuff, and I think they've actually stopped registrations because of some of the issues with it. But did you see this?
Yeah, so it's available if you've got the subscription, and depending on your tier of subscription, denotes how many videos you can produce and the resolution you can make at them. I mean, some of it looks kind of cool, but a little bit scary. Do you not think that... you can now, not only can we go and generate images that are fake, we can now create entire movies. I can see some of the benefits of it genuinely. Like if you now you've got a video on a website, nice festive thing. You don't need to go and pay a huge amount of money to get it animated. It's probably really good for small companies that they've probably got more ability to make things like this. But then the other part of me is it's really bad then for companies whose business is to go and make these things for bigger companies. I don't know how I feel about it, if I'm honest. I'm very mixed.
Yeah, I think that's probably fair to say that the photorealism of it is quite disturbing in some sense. And then obviously you're watching it and something just goes wrong, like the fingers go wrong, and it seems to be better at sort of a cutesy animation style than many other things. The people have definitely crossed over into the uncanny valley for me. The more I look at them, the way they move, that I really do struggle to determine the difference between what would be video and what is a computer generated image. This, for those that watch the YouTube, the couple drinking coffee here with hot, the steam coming off it walking through a market. I think you'd struggle to say that it wasn't real in many ways.
I completely agree with you. And just to note, the videos you can make are 20 seconds long.
Yeah. And I agree. I think the dangers to creatives are now hitting the video production market, whereas they already hit writers, they already hit coders, and now video production is, I won't say threatened, but has the potential to be threatened by this. 20 seconds isn't going to replace anybody who works in a VFX job. But the writing could well be on the wall for something like this. And for all the impressiveness of it being able to generate some of these things, like the duck on the back of the seahorse there is particularly quite sort of whimsical. It's not creative as such, is it? It's just replicating other people's work within the system. And I think there's a distinction to be made there between a creative doing something like this and just being a prompt engineer. I don't think you can be a creative prompt engineer. You're just refining it until you get the results of somebody else's work better. I think that might be a distinction that's worth making.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Like I say, I can see some of the benefit for a small web video, like a little clip, but I just worry now that how far is this going to go? And in 10 years' time, are we going to trust anything we see, even less than we already do? So
this is probably the same discussion people had when photographs were brought along, and they started bringing them into court cases and all the rest of it. And cards on the table, I think, as somebody who occasionally has to make infographics and things like that, stuff like this appeals to me a little bit. If I want an animation of, I don't know, encrypted data moving along a pipeline or something like that, something like this could produce it for me really, really easily, potentially. am I putting somebody else out of business? Am I failing to learn something myself if I do that? Am I not going to employ someone because I've made that choice? It's there's a lot of repercussions of stuff like this that's worth thinking about.
Yeah, I think that is it. It's the longer tail on it. It still blows my mind how much OpenAI are releasing week on week, month on month. If they went back and did a year in review, the amount of stuff they've done in 12 months, it's insane.
Tell us about the BBC.
So the BBC have complained about Apple's misleading summarization. I was going to say technology in speech marks because it's just awful, isn't it? That Apple summarization is just released this week with 18.2, as we discussed, and where we've had this. We don't know this person's guilty, but the person who's potentially shot the CEO of the healthcare company in America, the summarization for Apple News said that the guy that's been arrested has shot himself. He hasn't shot himself. He shot the CEO of the healthcare company in America. It's obviously been widely reported, and he's then been captured and has been taken into custody. But the BBC News article, and Rod, if you could just scroll down slightly, says Luigi Mangigore shoots himself. That is factually wrong, and this is awful, isn't it? I mean, here in the UK, the BBC is probably one of the most trusted news organisations, and for this to have BBC's logo next to it and to have an incorrect headline is awful, isn't it? And I think we've both seen this. We've been running the beta for a while. The summarizations aren't great. And actually on my wife's phone, we talked about at the top of the show, I turned off summarization for her because I think it would just annoy her. I thought she should just carry on as she is for a little bit longer, and maybe you circle back to it when it's been updated a bit more. But this is not a good look, and Apple have not commented on this.
Yeah, it's really bad. And actually, it made me turn off notifications as well. We've been joking about it for a couple of months now about how terrible the notification summaries are. I thought, you know what, I've had enough of this. I've just turned it off.
Yeah, I've had one scenario. I was due a refund from a train line here in the UK. The summarisation said, you've got a £100 refund. And I was like, well, that's odd. My ticket didn't cost £100. It was way cheaper. And then I look in the body of the email. There is not one bit of the email that mentions the monetary amount. It just says I've got a refund. So where it found the monetary amount of £100 from is a complete red herring to me. But summarisations are factually not great.
Yeah, I think our sense of humour about how funny they were when they were getting it wrong is turning into, well, this just isn't good enough, is it?
And I do think when you're summarising text from your mates, it's hard because you've got little snippets, you haven't got all the context, and maybe jokes have been going on for years. But when you're summarising a news article or an email, which is a bounded thing, I can't believe they've got it so badly wrong.
It's because LLMs hallucinate, but that's a whole different topic. Just to finish off follow-up, because we've gone a little bit long on it this week, the iMac Pro was launched 7 years ago on the 14th, so we're a couple of days up. Well, we're 1 day on from that now. 7 years old. Did you ever use an iMac Pro?
I've never used an iMac Pro, but I remember when this came out, and it was like, whoa, all-in-ones. Look at what you can do with an all-in-one. This was a great device. And then here we are 7 years later, and the all-in-one is pretty much defunct, which is why I put it in, because I think we spoke about iMacs largely being defunct now, which is a bit sad.
It is a bit sad. I don't think they ever upgraded the iMac Pro. If they did, only sort of very lightly.
Yeah.
It was
never more like a
screens,
one and done, wasn't it? It was just to tide them over until the Mac Pro came out because they were so far behind with the Mac Pro.
Yeah. Should we do a rapid fire through some news? So first story, there's a rumour that potentially Apple may revive the airport router lineup. I mean, we're going to talk about networking and things like that in the main show. I wonder if we'd be having a discussion about networking if Apple would continue to make airport routers.
Well, I've largely gone down the opposite, which is Eero, which we talk about. But I'm not surprised by this. There's lots of things in my house that would make great little routers. My Apple TVs would be, great Wi-Fi extenders. My HomePods would be great for this. I'm amazed that they haven't recircled back to this, but it does feel like there's a new emphasis around the home for Apple. So fingers crossed.
Yeah, I think that's probably the point, is they've realised they've probably lost a bit of pace in the home and giving up on the airport, which the later models of the airport weren't just Wi-Fi routers, they were also time machine backups and things like that too. So it was a device with a lot of potential. You could see if they stuck a screen on one as well, that could be their HomePod with a screen. What are they calling it? HomePod Touch is what another podcast is calling it, which amuses me no end.
Or HomePad, I've heard rumoured.
Yeah, HomePad Touch. So, I guess we'll see what goes on with these things. But I I think Apple's missed the boat here. It's too late for them to go back and do Wi-Fi. I think most consumers have moved on to something else.
I would concur. It's a shame they've missed the boat. I think they exited at the wrong moment. I don't know if it came through on my microphone, but as we talked about Apple in the home, my doorbell rang, which is up in my house, and it came through my HomePods down here, which is what the Apple Home should be about.
Yeah, it's my first wireless router was an Apple one. I had an airport flying saucer UFO looking thing back in the day, and I had a number of airport express routers, and they were fine. They were good enough, but then they were falling behind the technology and all the rest of it. And again, we don't need to labour the point, but I think that ship has sailed, Apple. Do something else.
I think the ship sailed, sadly. It'll be interesting to see what they do. But if they do it, you got to keep updating it. You can't just do one and done or miss standards. We want to see continual investment in this area.
Yeah. Report from The Verge this week that the next Apple Watch Ultra could have satellite texting. I guess that's ultimately going to come to everything. We've already talked about how satellite networks may take over from the sort of traditional land-based 3G, 4G, 5G networks, and I guess that makes sense. Don't think satellite's going to work quite so well indoors, mind.
Well, there is that, but this makes sense. If you're out hiking, you're just with your watch. If you're going after Garmin, this is what they should be doing. And interesting, they're on about having like a slimmed-down 5G modem in there that doesn't need to do all the high bandwidth stuff. 100% makes sense. You don't need big bandwidth stuff in your Apple Watch. You need light bandwidth and you need better batteries. So I think there's quite a lot to happen in the cellular modem space, especially with Apple doing more of their own.
I've just noticed this is 5G RedCap support, and I don't know what RedCap is. Is that the low bandwidth stuff?
I think it's the low bandwidth stuff from what I read last night.
That's interesting. Okay, good.
But it does feel like there's quite a lot to happen with Apple doing their own modems and this satellite piece. It feels like satellite and cellular are starting to converge a little bit more.
Yeah, I don't know that they iterate quickly enough on some of their features here to be able to get this very, very quickly. As we've talked about before, they struggle these days to walk and chew gum at the same time on some of the platforms. And this feels like an additional complication as well as putting out a hardware modem and all the rest of it. We haven't got cellular in Macs, as we talked about. Was it last week or the week before? So, I guess we'll see.
Apple have got a problematic story. Considering cellular is their main port of income, they've had an awkward history with it and potential future.
Yeah, definitely. Another company that's struggling in one particular area is Google. It's certainly been perceived as doing particularly well in the AI race, even though it has Gemini and has a lot of the early sort of work on this with its TensorFlow models and things like this. This week they released Gemini 2, which is its new AI model. Next generation of it is they call it a bit of a quantum leap forward to keep up with Anthropic and OpenAI and others. It also brings image generation, little bits of movie generation, better code completion, all the things that you'd expect to happen within an improved AI model. I think it's interesting. I'm not surprised Google have moved along this path. I'd say they're doing better than Apple are in the intelligence field, which isn't particularly surprising. They've certainly got a march on Android with stuff like this. I haven't really used it. I did go into my Google prompt and try it. I think I needed to pay £20 a month in order to be able to start using Gemini 2, so I thought, well, I'll just wait for it to filter down to the next level.
Yeah, one thing to note, at least they're using good numbering convention, and it's obvious when you've got the newer version, because I hate that with OpenAI. But if you go and ask my family, name an AI company, they will all say ChatGPT or OpenAI. None of them have heard of Gemini. They've been caught, snoozing, haven't they? A bit like Apple have. I think Apple and Google have really been, caught asleep at the wheel. So it's good to see they're iterating on it, but I've never used it, I must confess. And I think I'm waiting just to let some of it shake out a little bit more.
I've used them a little bit. I sometimes ask it for a bit of help with code things now and then, and I run an internal one myself, and I use the Mac Whisper's internal one too. So I've got a vague feeling for some of these large language models. Gemini is not as good as ChatGPT's. Absolutely, 100%.
Yeah, they're not iterating as quickly, are they?
No. So maybe this will improve things, but I'm unable to test that at the moment. One thing they are iterating on, or at least they're going back on as well, is this week they announced Android XR, which is a extended reality, they call it, OS for headsets and smart glasses. Apparently there's going to be a product brought to market by Samsung next year, which will make use of this. So this is effectively Google Glass version 2 that they're bringing on here. And we saw a little bit of this. We talked about it on this podcast, actually, on one of the Google demos, where somebody puts the glasses on, looks out at London, and it tells them where they are and what's going on and all that kind of stuff. And it looks quite interesting. I am always quite interested in this particular area of the market. I think there's a lot to be done in smart glasses. This is obviously where Apple wanted to go with the Vision Pro. So, I think this is an interesting redevelopment for Google.
Yeah, it's got to be their Vision OS competitor, hasn't it? It's interesting, though, given all the lack of press, I guess, Vision has got, or Vision OS has got, that Android are going after that area. So it'd be curious to see where they end up.
Yep. Fair enough. We'll keep an eye on this story. Amazon are also branching out into new things, and in Amazon US, certainly this year, you can start to buy cars on Amazon. What do you think of this story?
And the beast gets even bigger. It's just mad, isn't it, that you're going to go and buy a car? It's still working with local dealerships, but it's just mad. I guess you buy everything on Amazon, so why wouldn't you get a car?
You want to go and kick the tires in a car, don't you? You don't want to just... I guess if you know exactly what you want and you've already done all that kind of stuff, and they offer a good deal, then maybe.
Maybe, but like I say, it is with local dealerships, so it's not like you're buying direct from Amazon. I guess they're just the shop front, but curious place for them to go. But you know, what was a bookstore is now the car shop and a bookstore and the everything else store. So, I didn't see this one coming, to be fair. I thought this might be something they wouldn't want to chase down, but obviously I was wrong, and here they go.
And it's specifically with Hyundai, or Hyundai, or I can't say it properly. Hyundai, I think, is the correct way to say it. At the moment, they feature the Ioniq 5N, which is their sort of sports EV, on the front page. It's a pretty car. I like that blue they've got on there, but I genuinely don't think I'd be going to Amazon to buy a car.
I concur with you, and we can't. It's only in the US, but even if it was in the UK, it probably wouldn't be my first port of call.
Have you ever tried one of the Amazon stores which are available in parts of London?
I have seen a couple in London, but I've never actually gone in and tried it.
Yeah, interesting. They certainly are pushing out into new areas, aren't they?
I think I give Amazon enough money, and normally I try and go for British stores and support. I try and shop local where possible.
You strike me as a Waitrose man, Chris.
100%. Love Waitrose.
Last story in the news. Raspberry Pi has a new variant out this week. They've released the Raspberry Pi 500. They had a Raspberry Pi 400 before. This is basically the single board computer physically built into a keyboard. So when you buy it, you get the keyboard as well, rather than having it plug in a bunch of stuff. The keyboard has all the same connections as a Raspberry Pi would have. So it's got micro HDMI and USB and a network port and all that kind of stuff. It's a Raspberry Pi 5 with 8 gigs of RAM, and they've also announced, I think it's a 15-inch monitor that goes along with it.
Yeah, this looks kind of cool. The monitor looks... I'm a little interested in the monitor. It looks kind of cool. I don't know what I'd do with it, but I just think it looks great. The monitor's HD. It's about $120, I think, for the monitor. Great looking device. My son's quite interested in this. He was on about getting the Raspberry Pi 400. That's now dropped $20 from... it's now down to about $70, I think. You get a lot to play with here. Like, if you've got somebody that's interested in programming and wants something cheap to browse the internet, this is a great little device, do you not think?
I do, and they're very power efficient as well. And the Raspberry Pi 5, I've got one running in a couple of services downstairs, is good enough to browse YouTube at reasonable resolution. The Raspberry Pi 4 wasn't. You'd get lots of stutters and artifacts and things like that. The video acceleration wasn't great. The Pi 5 is a better machine. I still wouldn't choose to use it as my everyday computer. I think you're better off with something cheaper secondhand, and be it a laptop or be it an Optplex. But if you've got a very specific purpose in mind, like you're trying to learn about programming, or you've got something else you've got picked out for it, I think it's a great place to start.
Yeah, but no, my boy was quite excited when he came home from school and was telling me about this. So, because we were doing some programming of lights the other day, getting lights to flash, and he's got a little LCD, and he managed to make it say happy birthday to his brother the other day when it was his birthday. So it's helping him just play around the edges, I think.
I would recommend to your son that he has a look at this YouTuber Jeff Geerling, who does lots of Raspberry Pi things. Okay. So, for example, he has a video where the Raspberry Pi is the computer, and he reviews the monitors as well. This is the guy that managed to get a Radeon graphics card working with a Raspberry Pi. He's quite a good YouTuber, so I'd recommend that if you've got any interest in Raspberry Pi stuff at all, that he's worth checking out.
All right, I will send that over.
You do that. Shall we do some media?
Let's do some media. So we've got The Abyss in here first.
So I was feeling a bit nostalgic, I think, the other day, and I thought, I'm going to watch The Abyss and see if it still holds up. So The Abyss is a James Cameron film. I think he made it before Titanic. So just after Terminator 2, before Titanic, and it's set largely underwater and filmed largely underwater as well. It stars Ed Harris, it stars Mary Elizabeth Mastrantonio, and gosh, the film stands up. There's a couple of the sort of broader FX sequences where they're back on the beach or on the surface or during the storm with models and things. Not so much. But the underwater sequences are just phenomenally well done. And it's a 3-hour film, but as many of James Cameron's films are. But it nips along at a cracking pace. You never start waiting for something to happen. It's terrific. So I thoroughly enjoyed watching The Abyss again.
I don't think I've ever seen it.
You've never seen The Abyss?
And I like all the actors and actresses that you've mentioned, the director, so I should probably add this to the list of homework I've never done.
I absolutely think you should. And if you're a James Cameron fan, if you enjoy The Terminator, Avatar, Titanic, Aliens, any of those films, this is right up there. You can see the genesis of lots of things that came afterwards from this film. So I think it's got to be an essential watch for anybody who's a fan.
Right, okay. It's been on the list. I'll go and have a look.
Brilliant. And I'm learning I don't play trailers for very long when I'm on this because I don't want to get another media strike. So that was me. We have follow-up from you on something called Red One. What's that?
So Red One, a Christmas film. It's on Amazon Prime if people want to see it. I didn't know much about this, but I said to the kids, hey, look, this film's on Amazon. Why don't we watch something different? And so we've watched it. Rod, you instantly highlighted it's got 30% on the Rotten Tomatoes score, which obviously is not fantastic. And it's got 90% for the popcorn meter, though. Do you know what? This film isn't for everybody, but it really did keep my kids entertained for about an hour and a half. It's not the best film in the world, but it's not the worst film in the world. I'd probably give it about 50-50. It's got some great actors in it, as you can see in front of you now. It's got The Rock in it as the main character. But it was an alright film. It was just nice to watch something different because you do end up watching a lot of the same Christmas film, so it was good to have a different film, and this is included in Amazon Prime, so it was a zero cost one, but it was one that they were going to go watch at the cinema a few months ago, so there you go.
Wow. I mean, The Rock and Chris Evans is a good start, I guess, but this looks like a kid's Christmas film to me. It looks a bit long, 2 hours 2 minutes.
It was a little long, and it's got Lucy Liu in it, and that's J.K. Simmons there who plays Santa, so it's got quite a cast in it, but I think 30% is harsh. I think 90% is too high on the scores. I would, like I say, probably more like a 50-50 for me as a parent. My kids would probably give it a little bit higher.
Fair enough. You've been on the BBC as well.
I have been on the BBC. So I've read all the strike novels written by Robert Galbraith, a.k.a. J.K. Rowling. And I thought, I've never really watched the TV shows, and they're getting quite a lot of airtime at the minute because there's a new one coming out this week. And so I thought I should play catch up. What I do like is they're quite short, a number of episodes. As you can see, season 1's got 3, and then I think we're going to 2s, which normally ticks the box, but I was getting so annoyed watching it because they've changed so many plot points, and some of it I was like, I don't understand why they've made that change. And I do get they need to economise on the time. J.K. Rowling obviously writes notoriously long books, but it's just very frustrating. I think a lot of the decisions they made just to tweak some of the stories, I couldn't quite understand it. But on the whole, quite well done, very well acted. If you enjoyed the books, I would recommend watching them just to give you a different take on some of the characters. I
tried to watch the very first The Cuckoo's Calling when it came out, which I think is probably 5 or 6 years ago at this point. I didn't like it. Didn't watch any more of it. Gave up. Don't mind the actors. Didn't mind the sort of production values or anything. In fact, the main actor, whose name escapes me at the moment, who plays Strike,
Tom Burke,
is also in Mad Max Furiosa. He plays the other Imperator in Mad Max Furiosa, if you watch that film. So I wish him all the luck of the world. I've got no issues with that. I didn't think very much of it. I didn't think it was very compelling. I didn't think it was very interesting.
I would concur. I think I watched the first series when it first came out. The book, though, is very good. I really enjoyed the book. And I've gone on and read all the books since. So I've enjoyed that universe. I'm disappointed with the TV show, sadly.
Fair enough. This is a slight tangent for media, but the iPhone 15 has been used to shoot the next installment of the 28. I can't think of it. Universe, the 28 days, years, months later universe is coming. So 28 Days Later, which featured Cillian Murphy, directed by Danny Boyle from a few years ago. Terrific film featuring fast zombies. One of the best starts to a film I've ever seen, actually. Quite scary. Nice definitive conclusion. Was followed by 28 Months Later, which I think featured Robert Carlyle, and continued the zombie story of what happened. And now, just recently, we've had, in the last week, 28 Years Later announced, which is all filmed on iPhone 15s, apparently, to give it an appropriately grainy look for a low-tech future where zombies have taken over. Is this your kind of thing?
I don't like any scary films, so I've never seen it, so it has put me off. But I kind of want to see it because I do really like Danny Boyle as a director. So I kind of feel like I might need to go back and try it, but it depends how scared I'm going to be because I'm a big, not scary person watching films.
Yeah, I think it's probably worth a shot. I'm not really a horror film kind of guy either, but 28 Days Later, because it's Danny Boyle and because it's Cillian Murphy and because it's I think it's Alex Garland as well, Dread, Deus Ex, all those things too. It's a really well put together horror film. And fast zombies are a bit unusual. This one's starring Jodie Comer, Aaron Taylor-Johnson, and Ralph Fiennes. Great cast. Always picks good actors. Danny Boyle always snaps along very, very quickly. Yeah, I can see at the top Danny Boyle, Alex Garland. So I think it's worth a shout.
Yeah, he does normally do fast-paced films, to be fair.
He does. And last but not least, and this is definitely for me more than you, is Amazon has finally announced Season 3 of The Wheel of Time. The Wheel of Time books are, I think there was 17 of them in the end. The author actually died before he finished writing them, and it was taken over by another author called Brandon Sanderson. It's a proper fantasy epic. Anyway, we've had the first 2 seasons on Amazon Prime. They're very well done, I've got to say. Far better than the Lord of the Rings garbage that they put on there. And they finally announced Season 3 is coming along soon, so I'm very excited about that.
I'm glad you're excited for it. I hope they've done a better job than they did with Strike, as I mentioned earlier.
That's the BBC, though. That's fine.
It actually flashes at Warner Brothers at the end, which blew my mind.
Oh, does it?
Because I guess Warner Brothers and J.K. Rowling are joined somehow contractually.
Yeah, I think that's a contentious relationship these days. Should we do a bit of games?
Let's do it. It's largely with you, I think.
Yeah, very, very quickly, I think. So, Naughty Dog, famous for making The Last of Us, probably most famous for making The Last of Us at this point, and the Nathan Drake Uncharted series of games on the PlayStation.
Which I love,
finally in it. They are terrific games. Right from the outset, they were terrific games. Have announced their new property. They're making a sci-fi bounty hunter game called Intergalactic: The Heretic Prophet. I'm all in. I like a Naughty Dog game. Just the little clips and things that I've seen of this one look terrific. This is part of the Games Awards and a bunch of stuff that was announced this week by lots of games companies. Trailer running for PlayStation Studios, which I'll keep my eye on, but I just think it looks terrific. Nice cinematics. I rely on them for gameplay. I particularly like his futuristic-looking trainers that look like Adidas's or something to me, and the little still that they've got here. But yeah, I'm excited for this.
Yeah, same. I was bemoaning just the other day that I haven't really found many PlayStation games I want to crack on and play all the way through, so I'd love something like this, something just a bit different. Yeah, well up for this.
Yeah, and if you are a PlayStation Plus subscriber, you can go and you can download almost the entire back catalogue of Naughty Dog games in HD, be it the Nathan Drake games or the Last of Us. And you can get them on PC these days as well, so the world is your oyster. Great publisher, very trustworthy, good games.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Should we talk a little bit about Sony and Apple? So this story appeared, actually I think it was last week, where there was a potential interaction between Sony to get the VR controllers from their PSVR 2 working with the Apple Vision Pro. Now, famously, the Apple Vision Pro didn't come with controllers because they felt it was good enough to be able to just point at stuff. But I've heard a lot of people talking about it since, that there isn't the accuracy that you even get on the Oculus headsets because of the handsets that come with that. So this would be an interesting move by Apple and Sony.
Yeah, it would. I think Vision Pro works fine for your hands for doing everyday tasks like browsing the internet, looking at photos, playing a movie, but it's just not there for gaming, is it? So it is interesting. Annoyingly, the VR2, I looked at buying one. I looked again quite recently because they've been on sale. There's just not enough compelling reasons to buy it. I'd like it for Gran Turismo maybe, but it's not worth £300 to me to do that. Interesting they're doing this. Obviously, Apple have partnered with everybody else for game controller support, i.e., the dual shocks of your PlayStation, the Pro controllers, etc. from Nintendo. So this makes sense for them to do that. But it's interesting because the Vision Pro is such a niche market, and the Sony VR2 is such a niche market that it just seems an odd one that they're spending what appears to be quite a bit of effort on it. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, I think the VR2 hasn't done as well as the VR1. Sony haven't shifted as many
There's not
units
enough
as
games,
they did.
and there's not enough people that own PS5s. I think a lot of people have kept their PS4s because there's not been as many PS5 exclusives. There's not as many VR2 games. I think the story of buying it is not as compelling, perhaps.
Yeah, that might be true. The games are the thing. If the killer app is there, people will buy the hardware. And even at the Vision Pro at £3,500, if they'd had something absolutely killer that was a transformative experience, people would have found the money and they would have bought them.
Fair.
And that's just not true. The VR, the original Sony VR, was quite cheap. It was about £300, I think, when it launched. It was very low resolution, but it launched with Astrobot or a good game to go along with it, and that got people interested. There was some YouTube content. It's a fairly rubbish experience, I gotta say. I mean, I've still got one parked in a drawer somewhere. I wasn't terribly impressed with it. The VR2 is meant to be significantly better. It's got higher resolution screens. It's got better tracking. The accuracy of its controllers is very, very good as well. So I think it's a good device, but didn't have the games, and was more expensive, so people didn't buy it. This feels like the Vision Pro Mark II, really, doesn't it? It's interesting. Sony have put in an addition to this, so you can actually run the VR2 with a gaming PC. So you can run the VR2 as a VR headset for Steam, for example. I think that's an interesting way to go, but even that hasn't saved them, in the sense that they stopped making them, I think.
I'm assuming there's a big warehouse somewhere with boxes of these things in them.
And I did the same as you. When I was back on the gaming PC briefly, I was like, should I get one of these? It's only £300. You know, I could have a good VR headset to go with it. But the last time trying to get the Sony thing working with the PC was such a faff that I just gave up on it. And reflecting, it would be the same again. Even though Sony are actually supporting the widget and it wouldn't be a third-party thing this time. There's too many components in there for it to work well. And it seems to me, Oculus are the only people that are getting I hate to say it, Meta are the only people getting this right at the moment, that they're making an untethered headset that just works well with the games that it's got. It's fast enough, it's accurate enough, and it's only £300.
I think I would concur with you. Also, for me, when I game, I'm generally, my kids are around, and I don't want to put a big big wall in front of me and them. I want to engage with them. So I'm just not for me, I think, is where I've ended up.
But you could, if there was a cool experience, like I believe the table tennis on the Oculus is meant to be fantastic. You and your kids could play that for £600, 2 headsets, both have good gaming experiences, and still have change for another 4 of them, 5 of them, 6 of them before you went and bought a Vision Pro.
I did the opposite though. I bought a table tennis table in my garden, so we should go and do that.
The wind can affect the balls. I don't know that I like that.
It's part of the game.
I don't know that I like that. Should we do a main show?
Yeah, let's do it.
So, we're going to talk briefly about networking. I don't think we need to go into it in masses of detail. But our thinking was just, what is our networking setups at home? Why have we got them the way that we do? Why are they simpler or more complicated as needs be? And I think it's just worth 5 minutes talking through that. What do you think?
Yeah, it's fine with me. I think I'm going to go first and detail what I've got, because I probably have engineered mine to be super simple for various reasons.
I think that's okay. Let's just do a quick summary. Why would you want better networking? I mean, fundamentally, we all need good Wi-Fi in our houses these days. All our devices are Wi-Fi connected. You want to have good Wi-Fi that's available in your garden, in your house, wherever you go, and it works quite well as you wander around as well. So if you start streaming a thing in one part of the house, it should follow you around. You want that to be fast. You want it to connect quickly. You might want to transfer large files around. In my case, for example, after I finish recording the podcast and edit it, I've got 50 gigs of files that are a consequence of that. How do I get that 50 gigs from off my computer to wherever it needs to be, or when we're transferring stuff around? Gaming is a factor, probably more so in your life than used to be. You don't want high ping, you don't want latency, you've got to have that stuff working quite quickly. And then there's security as well. You might want to run security cameras, you might want not have your Wi-Fi snooped, so you want good security on it and all that kind of stuff. So there's lots of reasons you want good networking.
Yeah, there is. And if you ask people how many Wi-Fi devices have you got in your house, most people, I reckon, would massively underestimate, because they would forget about plugs and lights and all the things you've just mentioned in TVs and consoles. And it's not just your phone and your tablets or laptops, is it? So there is that. And there's just so much you've got on there. And also, now internet connections are getting so much faster. What you don't want to have is you're paying a lot of money to get the internet into your house, and then it comes into the main router, and then is then being very slowly broadcast around the house, and so you're not actually getting the best out of it.
Yeah, and my worry about that specific thing is most people just use the router that comes from their their provider, be it 3 or EE or Vodafone or whoever you buy your internet from, and then they stick up an old repeater, like an old 2G, 3G repeater around the house somewhere, which halves your internet connection speed to wherever it's going. So it looks fine because you've got a nice strong signal, but actually you've just halved the speed of your connection.
Yeah, I would agree with that, I think. And a lot of the routers that come are fine if you've got a relatively small house or you haven't got an extension. That's something to bear in mind. I've got an extension. You walk through an outside wall, but you're still within obviously the house, you're in the extension, the signal just instantly diminishes going through that massive thick wall. So that is something to bear in mind.
Yeah, so my house is just horrendous. It's got thick walls and they're basically full of soot. So we get almost no Wi-Fi penetration from this room to the next room. So it's been a serious thing for me about how I move Wi-Fi signal around the house.
Yeah, and keep family happiness by not having ugly adapters everywhere, but also making sure that their phones are connected. It's a fine line to walk, I think.
It is a balance. It is a balance. I think many new builds have less of a problem here because they don't have these kinds of issues, or they've thought about what connectivity is going to be like around the place. But if you're in a slightly older house, or like you say, you have an extension or brickwork put in, or something at odd insulation, there's lots of things can affect Wi-Fi signal. Or you're just in a super congested area. If you're in a flat with hundreds of Wi-Fi hotspots around you, that can have an impact as well.
Yeah, because you can bump into each other if you're using the same frequencies and channels. Same in offices. I've certainly seen that through work. So it's quite an art getting it right, and things. A lot of the devices are so much better in this day and age than they were 5-10 years ago.
They are. So on that, what do you do, Chris?
So mine's super simple. I've got about 5 or 6 Eeros around my house and in my shed. So Eero is owned by Amazon. It felt like Eero was going to get bought by Apple at some point because they were aiming for Apple, I think, with their quality, their design, their aesthetic, and you're showing the webpage here. So I've got a bunch of these. I've just got the Eero 6, not the 6E or the 7. 7's the latest. 6E's the one before it. 6 is before that. I've got a bunch of them dotted around the house, which all my devices support. But I've got them etherneted into each other. So I've run a physical cable between them, which I've hidden in various walls or in lofts. So they're all wired up so that when you connect to the Eero, it then your connection goes back down through the cable back to my main router, which is squirreled away in the garage. You can also use Eeros for the router, which I do. So I've taken out the one that came from my broadband provider, and I just use one of these. You just plug the Ethernet cable straight in the back, and it just simplifies it. So I run these everywhere. I think they're fantastic. You can get them on very good Black Friday sales, and they'll be significantly cheaper than the prices you're seeing in front of you now. But they're really good, and they come with an app. Everything's just done through an app. So it's super easy if you want to have parental controls to shut internet off for your children, to stop what sorts of sites they can browse. I think they're really good devices, and I've used them for a number of years now. The problem I have with the one I have on the right of the screen that you're showing is the 6 doesn't support anything greater than 1 gigabit Ethernet. So if I was to update my internet to a faster connection, I'd probably need to update to a newer one, the 6E or the 7, which I'm holding off doing because I don't want to spend any money at the moment, if I'm being honest. So I've just got those in for all the Wi-Fi, and I've positioned them where my patio is. I've positioned one on the room very near the patio so that when we're sat on the patio in the summer and our friends are over, everybody can get on the Wi-Fi, and off we go. So I've made sure the whole house is covered. I've got one here in my shed, which is plugged in via a long cable that goes back to the house. But it means that wherever you are, you're on the same network, if that makes sense. There's not 2 different networks competing. You're just on one big network that's got 6 of these repeaters dotted around. And it works really well for us. And generally, I don't have to do a lot to support it with my family. You can buy add-ons to Eero, so you can block adverts and what have you. And it tells me how much we downloaded and their stats and all of that. So for me, big recommend on the Eero for a very simple way of life. I was unsure about it being linked to Amazon, but actually, to be fair to them, they've been great custodians. They've let the Eero brand carry on, and the products seem good. They are expensive. That is one thing I would say. But then I use it all day, every day, and so do the entire of my house. So I would like to get the 7s, but they're just too expensive. For 3 of them, it's £1,500, which is a lot of money. I've then just got in the house a big Ethernet switch, which you actually gave to me because you were getting rid of it, and I've just got everything wired back into that. And before I do any upgrading, that's the thing I'm going to replace next, so I can get one that does faster than 1 gigabit. So I'd like to do 2.5 gigabit, and then I'm making sure any devices I buy will do more than that. Even when I'm using my iPad, I plug in an Ethernet cable to it. I've got it in the back of the monitor, so it just gets more consistent speed. I'm not worried about Wi-Fi being a problem. And that's all I've done, really. So where I can, I've run Ethernet, and I've tried to hide it, so if you came to my house, you wouldn't see any of these devices. Everything's plugged in with Ethernet where I can, and anything that can't be has got a good Wi-Fi signal. That's where I've tried to get. Does that make sense?
Yep, that does make sense. It's interesting you haven't upgraded, but then there's not a lot of need to upgrade if your devices don't support Wi-Fi 6, Wi-Fi 7, as they're called these days, and probably good enough. And most applications, except the gaming and possibly the moving large files around, it's more than good enough Wi-Fi 6 for those sort of applications. And it's only iPhone 16s that support. Actually, I don't think even they support Wi-Fi 7, do they? They're Wi-Fi 6E. Yeah. So I think it makes sense what you've done. Just to be really clear, you have Ethernet from a switch to all of these devices. I think they call it a backhaul on this kind of mesh network, where you plug physically into the devices. So even though they're wireless, they have a wired connection to improve the reliability and having them all in the same network. Yeah.
Yeah, correct. But you don't have to do the wired backhaul. You can just have them wireless, and that worked really well actually. When I did have that, I just took the opportunity to wire them all in, because I thought, you know what, me in 10 years time will probably be grateful for that, because I just want good internet in the house. And do you know what, wherever you are in the house, you can download whatever you want, and it's pretty quick. And we have a 900 meg connection coming into the house.
Yep, that's really good. It makes sense. It's not cheap though, is it?
100% not. So I probably bought the Aero Pro 6s. I think I got them for about £300 for 3. So you can get them for reasonable prices. I think you can get the 6Es for that now, but you've just got to time it right when they have a sale on. But you know what? There's ease of use, and I've had the 6s for about 2 years now. I barely have to touch them. I think that is one thing I would say. It is super easy to use, so we'd recommend it.
And this is good, and to be fair to them, they are expensive, but the stats I'm looking at, it's slightly justifiable in the sense that they've got quite fast Wi-Fi. They've got 2.5 gig Ethernet ports in the back of the middle spec ones, and 2 10 gig ones in the back of the high end ones, and that's impressive. That's really looking to the future for what's going to be available for consumer grade wireless networking equipment.
Yeah, 100%. I think when the Wi-Fi 7s come down to a price I can perhaps stomach, I would get one. I'd like one just to put in my garage as the main thing, because that's what I need. I need that one to go in the garage, so when I get faster internet coming in, it can then actually distribute it around. So I'm slowly thinking about it, and I'm making sure I run the right cables, and I'm slowly doing the upgrades to get to where I want to be.
Yeah, and your back end, as you've only got a gigabit Ethernet switch, then there's no point in you actually moving to any of these faster things, because your network's not really going to benefit from that.
That switch is the next thing to go.
There we go. That's you. For me, I went a far more complicated, some would say unnecessarily complicated way. Most of the nerds and the geeks use a company called Ubiquiti, and they make products from Unify. Ubiquiti Unify, I'll use it interchangeably through this. It's the same thing. I have BT EE. It's become EE, much to my disgust. Fiber broadband that runs to the house. That gives me roughly a gigabit connection back out. It comes into a BT Home Hub. I don't know which one it is, whatever the fiber one is that came out. This was slightly different from the way modems used to work in the UK. Or ADSL modems, you'd still have a phone line when this came in. Mine is purely a data line, and then you have a VoIP phone, voice over internet, voice over IP phone that comes into it. So you have to connect the phone as a network connection into the router, rather than it coming in off the phone line. I could, if I wanted, just run it straight into what is the sort of gateway for my network, and it works fine. Instead, I'm double natted, which is slightly annoying. So that's some network speak for network address translation. Is so you only have one IP address effectively when you're in the internet, and your router will farm out all the devices in your house. That's happening to me twice, because I've got to run the phone. Otherwise, we can't have a phone line. I occasionally wonder, do I need a phone line? But such is life, I guess.
What's a phone?
Used to have. Yeah, I know, but we have people in this house who are on call for hospitals, and it's more of an issue that I can't just get rid of.
No, I can understand that, but we've not had a phone in 11 years of moving in.
Yeah. I would quite cheerfully get rid of this bit. But c'est la vie, such as it comes with an interesting wrinkle that you always need to dial an area code these days. You can't just put in the 6-digit local phone call number. You always need to dial the area code because it's a voice over IP phone. Anyway, that's the sort of backbone of this. And as I've said before, I think the default router your company gives you are generally dreadful. They do the job for most people, and BT do sell mesh discs along with it, so you can spread it out around the house, but in my experience, they're not very good.
I think the thing to note, though, is sometimes you've got to be careful buying it from the provider because they will charge your your monthly rentals can increase with the amount of gear you have, and sometimes you're better to provide your own, I think. I think the routers have got better. Like I say, if you just want one router, probably what the company provides you is fine. I would be nervous of taking more, I think, because I think there are stealth costs.
So I've gone a bit extreme, and I have moved my entire internal network to this Unify equipment. So all starts with a thing called the Dream Machine Pro. It is a, what do we say, 12-port, 11-port router, where you have some internal switches, all gigabit connections, all gigabit, that let you do the Ethernet part. It has a built-in hard drive tray, so you can record media to that, and I'll come back to that in a little bit. It costs 348 quid, including VAT, for the UK, and comes with a little internal touchscreen. So for those watching in the video, if you can see where my mouse cursor is on the left-hand side, there's an LCD screen built into it, where you can actually swipe through and see what's going on with the network at that point as well. So you can see throughputs, you can see any sort of problematic connection things, and everything's going on. It's quite a nice thing. It's a rack-mountable thing, so it sits in a little comms cabinet I've got downstairs. You have one dedicated WAN port, which is where the internet connects, and then you have two 1 gigabit, unfortunately, SFP ports, which are fiber connection ports, effectively. On most switches, these would be 10 gigs and up. This is a consumer end version of what Unify offer, but this gives you your DHCP server. It gives you the ability to run Unify's own network management interface, which is where you can control all the other things from as well. And will obviously let you connect it to other things. You can also fail over on any of these ports to a second internet connection if you have them. So if you had like a cellular backup or a second phone line in that you wanted to fail over, then you can nominate one of these to fail over on. These aren't power over Ethernet, they're just 1 gig Ethernet ports. So it's a nice, robust thing with a built-in 512 gigabyte hard disk into it as well, which is user replaceable. As part of this, it lets you run Unify's security software, a little bit on that in a minute. So what I do is the cameras around my house record directly to this. They don't go off to the cloud. They don't go anywhere else. But Unify's management of security, which you can also get on my phone, there's iOS apps for this as well, are all managed here. So far, so good?
I think so far, so good. And it's only really the last year or so that home users are going beyond gigabit Ethernet. I think it's been around for 20, 30 years, but it's really only now that actually gigabit Ethernet is starting to fall off. So it makes sense why your Dream Machine is spec the way it is.
Yep. So I'll come back to how I change things in the future, but obviously I've got lots of devices in my house, lots of them are wired, and the Dream Machine does not offer power over Ethernet. So for everything else I'm about to talk about, you need a little bit of power over Ethernet. So I have a second 24-port switch, which, using one of the SFP ports, one of the fiber ports, I connect to the Dream Machine with, and that gives me gigabit, but power over Ethernet on, I think it's 8 of the ports as well. So by power over Ethernet, that means if you connect a hotspot or a security camera, they power directly off the switch. I don't need any of the power to them. It's just the same network cable you'd plug in. Cat5e in my case, because it's slightly older property. I would go Cat6 or Cat7 these days, but I've got what I've got. And the Dream Machine actually manages this switch. So all the connectivity, I can run VLANs off it, I can disable ports, I can turn things on and off, I can do all manner of crazy things through the network interface for the Dream Machine to this switch. But this gives me a lot more flexibility. It's also rack mountable, it delivers a lot of power, and it is fanless. It's another nice touch about this stuff. So even if you had this in the house, none of this is making any noise.
Yeah, that is obviously important, keeping the family happy with those things.
Well, it's down in the comms room anyway, so it doesn't matter to me. But if you were going this kind of route, you could. It's very geeky. You can SSH into it. You can do all sorts of clever things. The lighting on it's very, very good. So you can signify if it is VLAN, which is more networking complication that I'm not going to go into. But for example, say you wanted a separate network for your Internet of Things. If you didn't trust whatever random Chinese company made your light bulbs, you can put them on a separate VLAN to separate them from your main network. Or you didn't trust your TV provider for reporting all its advertising that you're watching back to them. You can block them all out and put them all on their separate VLANs. Very simply managed within this interface. So that's really cool.
Yeah, no, that is quite cool. I do like the sound of it.
So as time passes and I want to upgrade from 1 gig to 2.5 gig, Ubiquiti have also released new equipment as time has passed. So I've bought a couple of these Flex Mini 2.5G devices, which are only, well, including VAT, they're 46 quid, but they give you 5 2.5 gig Ethernet ports. So I know I'm going back to both of these switches are only 1 gig, but within the network, so for my network attached storage, for gaming PCs, for anything that can support 2.5 gigs and higher networking, I can actually join them together. These are power over Ethernet, so I can directly plug my PoE 24 port switch into port 5 of this, and it's powered from them. You can power them by USB-C as well if you want, but this is quite a nice little addition to the network where for 50 quid, well 100 quid because I bought 2 of them, I've got 2.5 gig Ethernet between these devices now.
That is quite cool. And could I just go and buy one of these and put this on my network?
You could, but what you're ultimately going to want is the Unify Network Management Controller that gives you all the fancy equipment. Now, you don't have to buy Unify hardware to get that. You can actually run it, as an application on your Mac, but it needs to run all the time to watch that. There's lots of ways of running it. You can run it in Docker containers. You can buy a bit of more professional Unify hardware that has it built in, like a Dream Machine or the non-pro version of the Dream Machine. But it kind of wants that sitting in the background so you can do things like, because even with this little switch, you can do the things like assigning VLANs and doing all that kind of stuff too.
It's just that looks a good way, like in my shed here. Well, if I had a couple of machines that were over a gigabit, well, that would be ideal of serving that. And if they wanted to talk to each other, they could talk really quickly, and that would be a good way of me sorting this office out, because I've only got one cable coming down here that I could then have multiple Ethernet down here, and then as I slowly upgrade things around the house, it's future proofing, isn't it?
It is. In the same vein, I've got a couple of Flex Minis, which are the same sort of looking device, but they're only 1 gig. But if you suddenly need a few more network ports at a particular location, you might need something like this. They're really cheap. They're 27 quid for an additional 5 ports we need to go. So I've got one of these behind my telly. None of those devices are, 2.5 gig or higher. They're all 1 gigabyte devices. This is also power over Ethernet. Power into one port, powers up as it comes from the switch, and then you've got a nice sort of network connection behind what's going on there. So I've got a couple of them. They sell them in 5 packs, which amuses me. So you can have 5 of these things for 126 quid, which is really quite good, actually.
It is good. And like you say, if you've got power over Ethernet and you just have one cable going somewhere, you can just drop a couple of these in and you could Ethernet in a load more devices.
Yeah, you absolutely could. I've also got one, and I've taken the Amazon link for this away because occasionally Amazon tries to show my postcode, older Unify Switch 8. So this is a 4-port power over Ethernet side, just 4-port gigabit Ethernet side, where if you do need to run a security camera or an airport or something where you're not immediately got access to the power over Ethernet that comes out of the main switch, you just need a bit more juice in a particular location, you can get one of these. They do them in 8-port and 16-port variants as well on the Unify website. This is an 8-port. I have a 16-port as well, because before I thought I'd go all in and buy one of the more expensive switches, I was trying to sort of keep it more restricted. So the 16-port one is £180, including VAT. And like I say, that gives you power over Ethernet as well. They're very good little devices, and again, can be managed by the main Dream Machine controller if you want to have that sort of level of flexibility with them. So that's sort of the backbone of the network. And what they are all for are to power, obviously, the Wi-Fi controllers. Now, the Wi-Fi controllers come in a variety of flavors as well. Primarily, mine are U6 lights. These are ceiling-mounted things most of the time. They come with a little bracket. They don't weigh very much. If we can get Ethernet to there, and they're also power over Ethernet, so these are all just powered off the switch as well. I don't need any additional equipment to run these. Cat5e comes out, plugs into the back of this, it powers on. There you go, you've got Ethernet. One mounted in the ceiling, a couple not so mounted in the ceiling, but sort of dotted around the place as well. But I've got, I think, 5 of these around the house in order to get enough connectivity with my impenetrable walls around the place, and that gives me blanket Ethernet connection, including outside. They're also waterproof. They're IP60 something or other waterproof, so you can actually mount them externally if you want. And interestingly for Unify, I've gone for this form factor, but the form factors they have are incredible. You can get them to mount on poles, you can get them built into walls. The wall ones are particularly interesting because in the back of them, they're powered by Ethernet, but they have Ethernet pass-through as well. So you will actually be able to plug directly into them too. So they're quite interesting devices. They go all the way up to, these days, Wi-Fi 7. You can get a Wi-Fi 7 compatible Unify device for 162 quid, which is significantly cheaper than Eero, and you can put them out as you want to go. I haven't got any Wi-Fi 7 devices at the moment, but I will replace my main switch my main AP at some point with a U7 Pro. I would have thought mine are mostly the Wi-Fi 6E ones, and that's sort of the background of the wireless. Does that make sense as well?
It does, and it's quite good. It's very modular, isn't it? And Eero is a little bit modular, but you can just chip away at it over time. But it's amazing the amount of stuff that Ubiquiti do.
It is. And just to finish this off, and I'm very aware we're going very, very long, and I can't find the link now, is that they do cameras as well. So I have a bunch of Ubiquiti cameras around, none of the very expensive ones because they go up in price fast. Ubiquiti is an enterprise company at the end of the day. They sell stuff for offices and large deployments all the way down to little guys like me. You could even do door access systems and things like that with them. But from a consumer point of view, you can put in a 2K camera, power over Ethernet for like 118 quid, and just plonk it somewhere. Or they do dome ones, or they got doorbell ones. And I've got a couple of these dotted around the house, pointed at the doors and on my doorbell. And again, all that video is collected and just goes back to the Dream Machine Pro. There's a nice little app. It does face recognition. It'll do. They continually improve it over time as well. For it knows that's a dog. It knows not to track that dog anymore as well. So there's lots of intelligence built into the back end of it as well. They're just a really well put together company that I've got a lot of faith in over the years, and lots of tech YouTubers do. And there you go, that's my network.
No, it is cool, and it is interesting just seeing all the different flavors that they do. And I guess it's one of those things, once you've started getting into it, it's then very easy to stay within that ecosystem and slowly just bolt things on as you've done over the years.
Their latest product, which fascinates me, is they've just released a NAS as well. So the Unify UNAS Pro it's a really good deal, I think, actually. It's 456 quid, including VAT. It has 7 to a 3.5 gig SATA base. So you could imagine if you put 7 24 gig devices in there, that's going to give you a fair bit of storage.
You mean 7 3.5 inch based?
That's what I mean.
Yeah, no, it does look good. Like I say, once you get into that ecosystem, it does then actually look quite price competitive then to bolt things onto it.
It really does. So there you go. That's my network. Should we do any questions on that, or should we just do App of the Week?
No, I think it's quite cool, and I think you've whet my appetite a little bit because I'm thinking about updating my wired network first, and this may well be my route into it. So I'm going to go and have a little look at it. Maybe I'll wait for them to have a January sale or something.
They don't do sales.
Not even Black Friday?
They don't do sales.
Oh, wow. That's challenging. All right, well, I just have to keep an eye on it then and save up some pennies.
You pay what you pay. Amazon will occasionally discount some of the older stuff, so it's worth keeping an eye on that. Okay. App of the Week.
Let's do it.
App of the Week is FileZilla. It's an FTP app. It's been around forever, it must be said. FileZilla, it's long in the tooth, but it also means it's battle tested. I have been using CyberDuck on the Mac for transferring some of my files around. CyberDuck actually really annoys me, and it's very slow to transfer, I've discovered, for some reason. I don't know what it does on the Mac networking stack, but if I'm transferring files over CyberDuck, it takes 7 to 8 times as long as when I'm using FileZilla. So I've just gone back to using FileZilla, installed it from Homebrew. There's Apple Silicon and Apple Intel versions of it. It will do FTP, SFTP, and secure SSH connections and transfer files around like that. It's very fast, it's very efficient, it's open source, and I kind of love it at the moment. It made such a difference from the CyberDuck thing that it was like a nice welcoming hug to go back to it.
So I used to use this I think I texted you last night, about 15 years ago. It's a name I hadn't heard for a long time, but it was bulletproof back then. And so it is one of those things. It's a really good app. It looks a bit basic. It's not fancy, but it does the job.
And sometimes that's all you want. And it supports all the things you want. It remembers your passwords if you wanted to. It's got bookmarks. It remembers connections. What more do you want?
Yeah, no, I'd agree. It is a solid app.
That is my app of the week. What's thing of the week?
So thing of the week for me, I've gone with an Audible book. Also, you could read it, but this is Bill Bailey, My Animals and Other Animals. I've never been a massive Bill Bailey fan, if I'm being honest, but I've seen him on a few things, obviously. Quite like the guy. Just a really nice autobiography. He reads it on Audible. Just quite interesting hearing about his life. So yeah, it's interesting, and he's a great person to listen to.
Fair enough. Yeah, he's a good comedian. He's obviously quite a clever, thoughtful guy as well. Whenever I've seen him on things, obviously stars in Hot Fuzz, so he's an immediate legend as far as I'm concerned.
Agreed.
Reading Ian Banks books as well, which if you've never read an Ian Banks or Ian M. Banks book, get on and do that. But yeah, fair play. Good recommendation.
Yeah, I think so. So pleased with that one. So go check him out.
I think we can call that a show, Chris.
I think we can. So if anybody wants to get in contact with us, Rod is at g5maniac@mastodon.scot, or he's on Blue Sky at g5maniac.bsky.social, or you can contact me at _CJP at mastodon.social. You can watch on YouTube by going to wakefromsleep.com and clicking on the YouTube link, or you can drop us an email at wakefromsleep@protonmail.com. Sorry, Rod.
And I jumped in there very quickly. Talk to you next week, Chris.
Cheers, Rod.